Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. I see people are kind of continuing to trickle in here, which is great. So this is the first of a series of webinars that the Berkeley Life team will be hosting this year. What we're looking to do really is to continuously support our accounts and help, I suppose, spread the word on nitric oxide. And share kind of what we're learning on a day-to-day basis when we speak to our practitioners around best practice, frequently asked questions, and the likes. So again, look out for this webinar occurring on a monthly basis from here on out. Before we start, I do want to call attention to upcoming webinar we have next week on February 8th with Beth Shirley, who's one of our scientific advisory board members and our expert on all things nitric oxide. So Beth will be spending a full hour kind of addressing questions that have come into us over the last number of weeks on all things nitric oxide. So definitely encourage you to sign up. You will have received email invites to that, and we'll be sharing out some more information on that between now and next Wednesday. So I think we'll get started. I do encourage you all to utilize the question and answers function here on Zoom. And what we'll work to do is answer as much as we can, obviously, as we work through the presentation. But anything we don't get to at the end, we'll make sure and follow up with you after the presentation. Okay, so starting at the highest level, something that some or most of you will be familiar with is the fact that research into nitric oxide's role in cardiovascular health won the Nobel Prize in 1998. And from then, the research into this space has continued apace. One of the most surprising things for us as a team that's focused on nitric oxide day in, day out is there's still quite a lack of information, I guess, from both practitioners and patients into nitric oxide's role in their long-term health. So we're working kind of on an ongoing basis to raise that level of awareness. But if you go on PubMed, you'll see over 100,000 clinical trials will populate when you search keywords like nitric oxide. So it just points to its significance in cardiovascular health and the potential it has for your patients and their long-term health. So what are our objectives for this webinar? We really want to recap, so building on the last slide, recap the importance of nitric oxide, clarifying any misconceptions, helping you understand the role of nitrates specifically, and making sure that everyone is comfortable with the concept of nitric oxide as a signaling molecule in the body. The common applications of nitric oxide. So that definitely something we want to expand on, because one of the challenges we always face with is nitric oxide is good for a lot of things, and we want to help our practitioners understand it at a more application-specific basis. And we want to share with potentially new practitioners to Berkeley Life how it's been commonly utilized in practitioner offices across the US. One of the novel components of Berkeley Life is our nitric oxide test strips. We'll talk about how best to leverage them in your practice, who you should test, and how you should test them. Then second last, our marketing team are constantly speaking to our practitioners, learning what they need to be successful integrating Berkeley Life into their practice. We'll talk you through a little bit of what they've developed over the last few months in terms of collateral that you can both use in your practice, using your emails, using your social media, where you can access it, and then also tying it back to how you can connect with your Berkeley Life sales rep to understand how that fits into your practice specifically. And then lastly, we'll look at some frequently asked questions. So, we get a lot of questions every day, but we can, generally categorize them into certain buckets, and we'll try to address some of them today. And then we'll continue to expand this list every time we do a webinar each month. So let's start with the importance of nitric oxide. So when we meet with practitioners, be they, in their practice or at conferences, generally the questions start to focus in on applications or specific areas that nitric oxide can be applied in their practice. We always encourage just starting those conversations to take a step back. Nitric oxide, again, is vital in healthy cardiovascular system and a healthy circulation. So if you think of, the commonly used statistic of the total length of capillaries and veins and arteries in your body, if laid out end on end, would be 60,000 miles or 100,000 kilometers. So nitric oxide isn't just benefiting the veins and the arteries in your body, it's also the microvasculature, vessels as thin as a human hair. All of those are being benefited by, vasodilated by the presence of nitric oxide in the body. And the reality is we all make nitric oxide. So your body goes to the effort to make this gas, to make this signaling molecule. As you can see here from the diagram on the left, over time, the health of your endothelium does decline with age. So in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, this is a common experience for patients that you see on a daily basis. And while nitric oxide doesn't explain the entirety of why this is happening, if you look at the graph on the right, you'll see that the decline in nitric oxide starts to occur for men in their late 20s, early 30s, and for women slightly later in their 40s. But by the time you're 60, the levels of nitric oxide are the same for both men and women. This is based on environmental factors, diet, stress, illness, medication, a number of issues that are common in our everyday lives. What we're going to touch on here today is that addressing this decline and supporting nitric oxide levels is quite straightforward to do, be that through dietary intervention or supplementation like Berkey Life. The piece here that I want to call your attention to, and we'll come back to it a number of times, is really as your patients get to the age of 40, their nitric oxide levels have started to decline significantly. Why I raise that is that when we talk about the test strips and who you should be testing, it really is every patient that walks through your door over the age of 40, take the 10 to 15 seconds, do a nitric oxide test, educate them on the importance of nitric oxide, and obviously then let them make their own decisions. But we commonly come back to the phrase, if you know, you know. And if you know about nitric oxide and you test for nitric oxide, then you'll likely take it because you'll understand its importance in your long-term health outcomes. This is probably one of my favorite quotes from Beth, who will do the webinar for us next Wednesday, is that nitric oxide plays a role in every physiological process in the body. So it seems like a fairly haughty claim, or I don't know the phrase exactly, but it's a big claim to make. And Beth will happily go through nearly every process in the body and explain to you where nitric oxide plays a role. But we can also understand for both patients and practitioners, a statement like this can be somewhat intimidating. So we want to make sure that you have the tools you need and the understanding you need to see where nitric oxide plays a role in your practice from an application specific perspective. So common applications of nitric oxide, and then by extension Berkey Life. So the commonality, again, tying back to what we mentioned earlier, is that all of these ailments, I guess, have a tie into poor circulation, reduced cardiovascular health. So the primary study on Berkey Life is on its support of patients suffering from increased blood pressure. So we look at systolic, diastolic blood pressure levels, endothelial function. We've seen fantastic benefits for patients just taking 2 capsules a day. Sexual function is again one of the most significant applications of Berkey Life. What we find is that patients are obviously very motivated to address issues they're experiencing with sexual function. And again, 2 capsules of Berkey Life in the morning has been shown to be incredibly successful for that. Neuropathy and diabetes, there's a significant I suppose challenge for patients going through this issue with the lack of effectiveness of other treatment plans that they've been offered. And again, fundamentally, these are both circulatory issues. So assuming that there's, still some sensation in the feet, patients will see benefits by supporting their nitric oxide levels if they're suffering from neuropathy. There's also benefits in diabetes, and Beth will touch on this likely on next week's webinar, in its ability to activate the GLUT4 receptor and pull glucose into the cell. Cognitive function, again, if you're getting adequate blood flow to the brain, you're ensuring that the nutrients and the oxygen needed for healthy brain function are present. Exercise performance. So when you're speaking to your patients, you'll likely the most common way that nitric oxide is due to the products they see in their GNC or their vitamin shop. These are often pre-workout supplements based on L-arginine or citrulline formulations. We'll talk a little bit more how Berkey Life differs to those, but generally better blood flow, better oxygenation to the muscles is going to support exercise performance. And you'll see athletes of all age ranges utilizing nitric oxide to enhance performance and recovery, importantly. Gastric function, similarly getting good blood flow to to the gut and intestine is going to support long-term gastric health. Again, this is an area of specialty for Beth, and she'll touch on this next week's webinar in more detail. We also have a fantastic white paper she's developed that goes into this in much more detail, and not just the benefits of nitric oxide for gut health, but primarily the benefits of nitrate for gut health. So all of these applications that you see here, there's video content available on our YouTube channel, and there's white papers available on our website, and we'll point to that later in this presentation. And we've started now to develop simple bifolds for your patients that just give them the high level view of how nitric oxide can potentially help them in each of these areas. Those are available on our website right now, or they should be available for inclusion in your next order here shortly. And just make sure to request those when placing an order if you have a specific application type that's of interest. One thing to touch on is the test strips. Those actually were originally developed for exercise performance, for high performance athletes, wanting to ensure their nitric oxide levels are optimal before training or before competition. So most times we don't expect patients would want to buy test strips in any significant quantity. But the one caveat to that is patients that are looking to optimize triathlon, marathons, things like that, they likely will test on a more regular basis. So importantly, what do you see on a daily basis, or what are particular patient concerns that are showing up in your practice that you can, or your staff can logically tie back to a decline in nitric oxide or an issue with nitric oxide levels? So again, I won't go through these in much detail. They mirror kind of what's above. But these are the types of patient concerns that will come up in a normal patient workup or a patient exam. Once you see these, or once you understand that the patient is suffering from one of these issues, the simplest way to progress the conversation onto nitric oxide is just by, again, conducting the 10 or 15 second nitric oxide test, seeing where the patient comes up on the color scale, and then, having the conversation about how nitric oxide might help for them. We'll talk about the testing protocol here in a second, but this just gives you an idea of maybe some things that you wouldn't have associated with declines in nitric oxide that we see commonly from our practitioners, or as feedback from our practitioners, as they hadn't expected this to benefit from nitric oxide, but in fact it did. Again, really just to emphasize what I touched on earlier, as patients come in, if they're over 40, it really isn't a case of if they're suffering from declining nitric oxide, they likely are. And unless they're taking the adequate steps with their diet or supplementation, this is likely they're somewhere along this curve. So making sure you test them, making sure they understand the potential benefits of nitric oxide is critical. One thing to call out is that patients that do choose to go the dietary route with increased intake of dietary nitrates, we would still recommend that they use the test strips on an ongoing basis to make sure that their source of nitrates, or their source of leafy green vegetables, I should say, is giving them the dietary nitrate they need to support their nitric oxide levels. So let's talk about the testing. So as we've talked about a number of times in terms of who should be testing, the process of testing is quite straightforward. Hopefully most of you will have seen or have some in stock of these nitric oxide test strips. The idea here is that you're putting the pad right next to the saliva here and on the surface of the tongue, leave it on there for about 5 seconds, take the pad out, bend the test strip in half and press the two ends together. The result then will appear on the pad next to the black line. A couple of things to call out is that the test, before doing the test, ideally patients won't have eaten or drank anything for about 15 minutes beforehand to make sure you get an adequate or an effective result. What we're measuring here is the level of nitrite in your saliva. So nitrite in your saliva is a precursor to nitric oxide in the body, but importantly, it also shows that you have the required oral microbiome to convert the nitrate to nitrite. So this is a test that, again, anyone can do. You have two options then once you test the patients. Obviously, you're explaining to them the importance of nitric oxide and potentially utilizing the different materials that we provided. But when the patient takes 2 capsules of our product, they can either, assuming the length of the visit is maybe more than an hour or 90 minutes, they can test again before they leave the practice. or you can send them home with one of our foil wrap test strips to test at their own time. Absolutely the best case scenario here is the patient will test again after 90 minutes and send you or one of your team members a picture of the test strip to show that improvement. Oftentimes it's best that patients set a reminder on their phone, because with the best will in the world, people go back out into the world and have busy lives and forget to retest. So the simple act of setting a reminder on their phone will make it more likely that they'll remember to take the test again. So a couple of things that often come up here regarding the test strip is that, okay, what happens if I take 2 capsules and retest again in 90 minutes and don't see a change? So in that scenario, it's likely there's an issue with the oral microbiome. So, it's important to ask the patient, like, are they using any strong antibacterial mouthwashes? Those can affect the health of the oral microbiome. Are they on any strong antibiotics? Again, similarly, antibiotics don't really mind as a good or bad bacteria. They're just killing bacteria, so that can also affect the health of the oral microbiome. Those are the 2 most common issues that can occur. And then how do you go about, renewing or reinstating the oral microbiome? The best answer to that is continuous use of a nitrate-based product. So again, either diet or supplementation. But what we found is consistent use of our 2 capsules a day, and obviously stopping whatever it is that's causing the effect of the oral microbiome. That has been found to reconstitute the health of your oral bacteria. So if you have a patient that doesn't change on the test strip, have them take the product for about 10 days and then have them retest at the end of that 10 days. And they then should start to see an improvement on their test strip. So we'll touch a little bit here on the 2 pathways, and this kind of jumps ahead a little bit to one of the questions in the FAQ. Nitric oxide products, be they consumer-facing products or practitioner-only products like Berkeley Life, fall into 2 main categories. You have your L-arginine or L-citrulline products, and then you have your nitrate-based products. So the L-arginine and L-citrulline, you'll see here on the left, this is an enzymatic pathway. So it relies on the nitric oxide synthase enzyme to develop nitric oxide in the body. So generally, we're not deficient in L-arginine or citrulline. The issue is that the nitric oxide synthase enzyme becomes uncoupled. Again, this is something that we have a white paper on and many videos on, just elaborating on this point. So what you'll find is that as you age, like honestly, at the age of 35 and above, this pathway becomes much less effective. So when we think of patients suffering from cardiovascular health issues or as over the age of 40, it really isn't the most effective route to support their arginine and citrulline pathway, because not only is it not creating nitric oxide, it can have potentially negative effects, again, which we elaborate on in the white paper that we can happily provide to you, or you can access through our website. The nitrate pathway, what is happening in the nitrate pathway is, in normal circumstances, you're consuming leafy greens like spinach, beets, arugula, bok choy. The body then absorbs that in your upper intestine, and then through a thing called the enterosalivary pathway, a portion of that nitrate load is actually concentrated in your saliva glands. In your mouth, the oral bacteria will convert the nitrate to nitrite, and then you swallow that nitrite in your saliva. And in the acidic environment of the stomach, or as needed, the body converts that to nitric oxide. The reality, as most of you know, is that most of your patients are not getting sufficient nitrate in their diet. They're not eating the leafy greens. The common diets that we reference when we talk about this is the DASH diet or the Mediterranean diet, all of which are extremely high in dietary nitrate intake. So this is something patients aren't getting the diet, and again, you'll be familiar with. Trying to elicit dietary change in your patients is one of the most difficult things you'll likely do. So 2 capsules of Berkeley Life is providing the nitrate equivalent of 5 ounces of spinach or 7 ounces of beets, and that will sustain your patient's nitric oxide levels for about 6 to 8 hours. After that, we commonly are asked the question, what do they do after 6 to 8 hours? In an ideal world, at lunch and dinner, they'll consume some leafy greens like spinach, beets, or arugula. And then if you determine as a practitioner to take additional capsules, that's something that you can also offer. But that at a high level is the 2 main pathways that the body makes nitric oxide. So again, we like to offer as much support to our practitioners as possible. And we also, we really do emphasize that specifically for the test strip is something, the testing process is something that can be administered really by anyone on your team. We have a lot of practitioners that have the test strips at the front desk and, have the front desk staff recommend that the patient take a test while they're waiting. And we'll touch on that a little bit more later. But talking points like these really do help, start the conversation with the patient. And as we touched on earlier, once patients understand nitric oxide, they'll see the benefits for them and their long-term health. It's rare that patients will come into the practice looking for this, at least not yet. But we have to raise the subject of nitric oxide, and we really work for our practitioners to make sure that conversation is as easy as possible and as informative as possible for the patient. To that point, here's just an example of some of the marketing pieces that you will receive when you start to work with Berkey Life, if you haven't already. So a couple of things to call out here. We do share sample packs, which have a 10-day supply of Berkey Life, so 20 capsules total and 4 test strips. The idea here really is that for everyone on your team to be able to do the before and after test, so they're all familiar and comfortable with the process. So the idea is that, again, any staff member should be able to administer the test or at least answer the patient's basic questions when it relates to nitric oxide. But we provide them as part of each or shipment that we send out for new practitioners. Nitric oxide trifold, again, is a straightforward piece that offers all the information your patients will need on nitric oxide. And as I've touched on earlier, there are specific application-specific bifolds that we have developed that will be available shortly and are currently available on our website for download if you wish. The guide to shopping nitric oxide product is a really, really important piece to point out. This again stems directly from feedback from our practitioners, where a practitioner will obviously go to the effort of educating their patients on nitric oxide, potentially even starting them on Berkey Life. And then a number of weeks later, we'll find out the patient has purchased subsequent months worth of product from Amazon or GNC or Vitamin Shop. So Berkey Life is a practitioner-only product. We work extremely hard to make sure that we have our practitioners' best interests at mind, and we try to keep the product available only through the practitioners' offices. What we've offered in this guide to shopping nitric oxide products is an overview of your patients on why arginine and citrulline products aren't as effective for them and their long-term health, and similarly trying to differentiating why Berkey Life is different from other nitrate products on the market, and the benefits of it being a practitioner-only brand. So this is something, as your patients are considering Berkey Life, is important to share this information with them also. The patient referral cards we'll talk about a little bit more when we talk about Berkey Life Direct, but these are a useful tool again for leveraging fully the Berkey Life Direct platform. Similar to what we talked about previously, the more information and as centrally as you can put it in your practice on the benefits of nitric oxide will just maximize the benefits of the linger time patients have in your waiting room. We have available video loops with captions that you can put on any screens you have in the office. We have displays and posters which you can post in your waiting room or in your treatment rooms. The ideal is that patients are potentially doing the test before they come in to visit you as a practitioner, and that starts the conversation. Again, they could administer it in their own time as they're waiting, or you can potentially send it. We have some practitioners that work remotely that send it to their patients to do themselves at home. This is probably one of the biggest efforts that our marketing team went to last year, was setting up a practitioner portal. So you all should have access to the wholesale back end of our website. In here, if you click on the My Account and then Marketing, Training and Resources, you'll have access to all of the various pieces of collateral, both educational, both marketing, both practitioner focused and patient focused, for you to download for use in your practice or in your own time. One call out here is that not all of these materials are available in physical or hard form copy. The best way to learn what's available in hard form copy is to speak to your sales rep, and they'd be happy to walk through that with you. But again, you're free to print this on your own if you wish, or request the collateral from your sales rep whenever you go to place an order. Really important continue to check in on this platform, because we're constantly adding new information, new marketing pieces. You'll be shared information and updates in those via email, but you can always check in here in your own time. Berkeley Life Direct, this is probably, the most significant or most exciting part of how we're working with our practitioners, is offering practitioners the ability to direct their patients to berkeleylife.com to purchase product with their unique code. So the idea here is that for practitioners or for patients that are maybe not coming into the office as frequently, that you're working with remotely, you still want them to have access to practitioner-only products like Berkeley Life. So to sign up for this, you can either go to our website and click on the Berkeley Life Direct tab, and that will give you all the information you need. Once you're signed up, you'll receive a unique link and a unique code. You can use either or for them, and the patient then will be able to log into the website and place an order. Once they place that order, you'll receive an email notification to let you know that the patient has placed an order. And that allows you to follow up with more specific instructions as needed. You also have access to a back-end portal on our website that will allow you see in real time all of your patient activity, or your patient ordering activity, I should say. And the marketing team, through the online portal that we just referenced, will be providing email and social media content so you can continue to promote Berkeley Life and maybe the Berkeley Life Direct platform specifically on your social channels and in your emails. So again, if you're interested in Berkeley Life Direct and you're not currently using it, definitely connect with your sales rep and they'll be happy to explain to you more. Or go to berkeleylife.com, click on Berkeley Life Direct, and the sign up takes less than 5 minutes. Lastly, and I would say most importantly, the central place to find all of the information on what's going on with Berkeley Life, the latest marketing pieces, the latest educational events, conferences we'll be attending, really anything that you need to know about the Berkeley Life brand, is through your email. So if you'll see emails coming through, if there's other staff members you want to receive those emails, make sure to let us know. But all the information we touched on just here will be shared through your email on an ongoing basis. We try to limit it. We don't try to overwhelm you with emails, and send you kind of what's relevant to you as a practitioner. So lastly, we'll go through some frequently asked questions, and I see there's some questions here in the chat that I'm happy to address as well. So how often do people need to test their nitric oxide levels? Really, most patients only need to do the before and after test once. So they come into the practice, you do the test, give them the 2 capsules and retest them again. The ability of the test strip to give you the opportunity to educate patients on nitric oxide, to validate the effectiveness of Berkeley Life, and then on subsequent visits, potentially hold them compliant to, or hold them accountable to the protocol you've offered, that is sufficient. The scenarios where we have patients test on a more regular basis are probably fall into 2 categories. One is those patients I referenced that are high performance athletes looking to optimize nitric oxide levels for performance or competition. The other is patients that are looking to, maintain or pursue optimal nitric oxide levels through diet alone. Again, touching on the fact that not all leafy green vegetables have the same amount of nitrate. It's important that if patients are going to the effort of adjusting their diet, that they're getting those nitrates, and the nitric oxide test strips don't care whether they've received their nitrates through capsules or through food. It will give you a positive result if your nitrite levels in saliva have increased. Currently, we don't know of any contraindications to the product. The best way to think of this is if the patient is able to consume leafy greens, then they're able to take Berkeley Life. The one caveat to that is that oftentimes patients that can't consume leafy greens because they have an oxalate sensitivity. That is not a concern with Berkeley Life. We have many patients with oxalate sensitivity that take our product without issue. So again, can patients just eat leafy greens to get the same results? Re-emphasizing the caveat that they absolutely can, but it's important that they ensure the source of their leafy greens has nitrates or sufficient nitrates in it. The cost of the patient, so for each 1 month supply of Berkeley Life, so that's 60 capsules, that's a $49.99 cost per patient. Your cost as a practitioner is $30. Two call outs on that is that patients that choose to use the Berkeley Life Direct platform, there are some options there where they can receive better pricing based on volume, based on subscribing. but those are obviously all long-term benefits to you as a practitioner. Secondly, for the practitioner price of $30 a box, there are beneficial pricing breaks with volume, and you can talk to your sales rep about that specifically. So when and how much should they take? This relates to the capsules. The protocol we recommend normally for everyone is 2 capsules first thing in the morning. I believe it says in the packaging to take with food. That is, it's honestly, my experience is the product is extremely well tolerated. So the patient should take it first thing in the morning. And again, that lasts for about 6 to 8 hours. And whether they take more in the afternoon is really something that you can determine as their practitioner and based on the test results that they see. Again, how should we compare Berkey Life to other nitric oxide brands? Really just understanding how it falls into those categories. So is it an alarginine citrulline product? If so, patients over 35 are not going to see the same benefits from that. As it relates to nitrate products, really leveraging the test strips to make sure that the products that they're taking are showing up on their test strip. We've seen a lot of like beetroot powders, for example, that are available in the consumer channel that actually don't contain much nitrate. So they're inexpensive, but not effective. And then similarly, price is always important for patient compliance. So there are nitric oxide products on the market, but they're a lot more expensive for the patient, and the more expensive for the patient, the less likely the patient is going to be compliant. And then lastly, can patients access the product without going through the practitioner? Not technically, they have to go through the practitioner, but they can access it. If you want them to be able to access the product through our website, sign up for Berkey Life Direct. You will have the unique code, a unique link that they can use to access the product. Other than that, if they come directly to berkeylife.com, without that code, they will not be able to purchase. And again, that's intended to make sure that any recommendations that you offer to your patients, you're kind of seeing the benefits from that, as well as the patients in their long-term health. Okay. Lastly, just a call out for anyone on the call here today. Happy to provide 2 free trial packs for any minimum product and minimum product orders. You'll see information on the minimum product orders if you go to our website or if you reach out to your sales rep. They'd be happy to help you with that. But again, 2 free trial packs, and that ends at the end of February. We will be sharing anyone that attended, and I believe anyone that registered for this will have access to the training in full. Any questions that come up from you or your staff after this, feel free to email info@berkeylife.com, again, or talk to your sales rep, and they will be happy to either answer it themselves or get it to someone that can answer it. If you have test strips on hand, make sure they're in every consultation room. And just for this course of a week or 2 in February, it is Heart Health Month after all, just try testing every patient over 40. See what the results are, see what kind of questions comes up. I think you'll be surprised at how many patients are deficient in nitrite in their saliva, and as a result, nitric oxide. If you have marking materials on hand, make sure to put them in very prominent places in the practice. We're happy to send more with additional orders as you request them, and make sure to check out the online portal to see what's available, and start to maximize different applications of Berkey Life. Again, we're always here to support. You can schedule a call with us at any time or email us at any time, and we'll respond to you. I generally try to respond to you in 1 business day, but we're always here to help. So I believe that is everything. Great. Okay, that was a lot of information. I appreciate. And outside of the questions that we have here, any comments or feedback that you want to share with us for future presentations, please send that into info@berkeylife.com, and we'll be happy to go through it then. Okay, so I'm going to go through these questions and try and answer as many as I can. Fair warning, I may defer some of the more technical ones to Beth's conversation next week because she is better qualified to answer them. So Dee's first question is, when will the recording be available? I would say by tomorrow, Dee, we should be able to have a recording available to you. So the question from Dr. Gamble is, will you have to keep using the product, or can you decrease needs over time? So unfortunately, patients will continue to need the product unless they take other steps to address their nitrate deficiency. So at any point, patients can consume more dietary nitrate, but it really is dependent on the patients that you're working with. because nitric oxide is a gas, its half-life in the body is quite short. So the actual gas itself is milliseconds, but because we're giving you a significant amount of nitrate per dose, that's why it lasts 6 to 8 hours. So the cumulative benefits you're experiencing are the circulatory endothelial function benefits, but in terms of nitric oxide specifically, you're talking about 6 to 8 hours per 2 capsule dose. Okay, so a question here similar to. So, okay, this is an interesting question. Thoughts on a teenager, 16 years old with low levels on testing, healthy vegetarian. So the important thing here is when you're in your teens and 20s, your body is likely generating adequate nitric oxide through the arginine citrulline pathway. So as we touched on earlier, and so you can click back up to that while we're talking. So this pathway on the left-hand side, this is where your body can and does create nitric oxide levels in your teens and 20s. It really is a case only if you have significant symptoms or a lot of inflammation or what have you. Other than those, you're going to see declines in the arginine citrulline pathway after the age of 35, 40. So it's more than likely, unless they're exhibiting some other significant symptoms of circulatory issues, that someone in their teenage years actually has adequate nitric oxide. So again, Leslie, hopefully that earlier answers your question on the long-term, whether you need to continue taking the product or whether you can come off it over time. If taking 2 capsules a day in the AM and your levels are still low on the test strip, is there any problem? So taking 2 more later in the day. No issues at all, really. Like the DASH diet, which is what this product is based on, is 1,000 milligrams of nitrate a day. Our product in 2 capsules gives a little over 300. So in terms of what we know that's easily tolerated, we're comfortable enough saying that. We have requirements and regulations in terms of how much we're allowed dose per capsule, but as practitioners, utilizing the test strips and understanding your patients, you can adjust dosing as needed. I'm trying to recording available Coumadin. So the questions here on what if patients are on Coumadin. Fortunately, that's not a question I can answer just regulatory wise, but I do encourage you to attend Beth's webinar next week, and we can make sure to include that question in there. As a clinician, she'll be much better placed to answer that question. And then the question on its effectiveness related to male sexual function. Honestly, that is probably one of the primary use cases for Berkeley Life, especially for patients suffering from age-related ED, and the decline in nitric oxide can cause that. We have some patients that are seeing unsatisfactory results taking or on various other common protocols for ED. With the addition of adequate nitric oxide, they've seen much more successful results. And again, that's just your standard 2 capsules a day that you're going to see those benefits. We're considering and looking at doing some type of research into that specific area that we'll hopefully be able to share more with you later in the year. So Sharon has a question here. I had a question. I've been doing this for about 4 years, and about 30% of patients remain low. Also, so Sharon, honestly, I would say the question around issues with epigenetics, underlying inflammation, oxidative stress, problem BH4, that likely is best answered by Beth. One comment on the testing process. Everyone has the pathway in the body that recirculates the nitrate back up into the mouth, and then the issues can occur then when someone doesn't have the oral bacteria. So if you test someone before, take 2 capsules, and then retest them then in 90 minutes time, and they don't show a change in the test strip, that again we know there's a defined amount of nitrate in our capsules. And we know the body has the pathway to circulate back to the saliva. So if they're not showing a change in the test strip, it almost certainly is due to the fact that they don't have adequate oral bacteria. So I would say consistently taking nitrate is one way to address the issue, but it's also important to get to the root cause of what might be causing that impacted oral microbiome. It's also important to remember that the microbiomes of the body are all, interrelated and connected. So someone that has issues with their gut microbiome will likely have issues with the oral microbiome as well. So it's kind of a vicious circle there, but that's something that we can add on to the conversation next week with Beth, and she can answer in much more detail and kind of maybe go through a checklist of, okay, I'm not seeing sufficient results from 2 capsules. I've tried all these things. What should I do next? Because it's a commonly asked question that comes to us. Ilana, yes, to confirm the 2 protocols for ED that you mentioned, that nitric oxide benefits them, that's absolutely correct. Unfortunately, I can't mention medications on here, but that is correct, your assumption there. Actually, one call out that I should have done is in March, we'll have Greg McKettrick joining us. He's a pharmacist that treats exclusively male and female sexual function, and he'll go into that in a lot more detail. So he'll be on our AMA early March, and I encourage anyone that's seeing patients with issues or concerns around sexual function, male or female, to please join that webinar, and we can dive into that in much more detail. Okay, so those are the primary questions. So again, I appreciate everyone jumping on the call today. If your question wasn't answered, or I was not, from a regulatory point of view, comfortable answering, please join next week, and Beth will be diving into a lot of these topics, and we'll be happy to answer those questions. And we'll have the webinar recording shared with you all tomorrow. And as always, don't wait for these types of events to get trained on nitric oxide. One of our team would be happy to join a call with you and your staff and go through this in detail, and maybe tie back what we're discussing specifically to your practice and your practice needs. But for us, that is all for today. Again, sign up for next Wednesday's webinar. If you're interested, there is the offer of 2 additional trial packs for any minimum order quantity placed until the end of February, and you can reach out to orders@berkeleylife.com or to your sales rep in order to receive those. But I appreciate your time, and we'll hopefully talk to you all next Wednesday.